Okay, that's 12:30. So can I welcome you, a warm welcome to everybody to this open meeting of Grampian NHS Board. We are meeting today following a wee bit later than usual, following a closed board session, and I'll say a bit more about that in a wee while. Can I ask Sarah to note any apologies today?
Yes, thanks, John. We have apologies from Luann Grujon, Dennis Robertson, Stuart Humphreys, Leslie Meldrum is deputising for Stuart today, and from Sandra McLeod.
Okay, thank you very much. And do we have any declarations of interest for the items on the agenda today? Okay, I see none, so we'll record that as none. So as I say, a warm welcome to all members and to the to the press and to members of the public. Excuse me. I'll go on to item 3 just now, which is the interim chair and chief executive introduction. So I'll start off and would like to say that we're slightly later today because we had a closed session this morning when we were considering the annual report and audited accounts and the draft delivery plan and workforce plan, which are both to be submitted to the Scottish Government. Parliamentary and Scottish Government convention require us to take those items in private until the Scottish Government have received them, but we hope that they can both be published soon, as the delivery plan and the supporting enabling plans set the majority of this board's business over the coming 8 months. Before I turn to the context for today's agenda, I want to highlight that this is Rachel Little's last board meeting as employee director. Caroline will be saying a bit more about her terrific contribution to our work here in NHS Grampian. But I would like, on behalf of the other non-executive members, to thank her very much, not just for her work, but the way she carries it out. Rachel embodies the NHS values of kindness and compassion, and we will miss her always constructive contributions to our discussions. Rachel has reached the end of her term of office, and so, as mentioned at a previous board meeting, we now welcome Stephen Lindsay as her replacement. Turning to today's agenda, all of the items will be considered in the context of a health and care system which is really still toiling under the continued impact of COVID, but which we are agreed must be reformed into creating a sustainable system. As a board, we are ambitious for the future, but realistic about what we can achieve in the short term and the importance of those short-term measures. We know that we need to create the building blocks now for a sustainable, robust health and care system, but we must do this in a way that is credible for and compassionate towards our workforce, who are still working under conditions of extreme pressure, and we're acutely conscious of that. The delivery plan to March 2023 that we discussed earlier today in the private meeting sets out achievable and realistic milestones and embodies this board's approach to shaping up the system while still dealing with the long-lasting effects of the pandemic and the current pressures. We look forward to sharing a finalised version of that at our next public board meeting. The update that we have on the Moray maternity services and the paper on a business case for an MRI scanner at Dr. Gray's Hospital, they're both are tangible expressions of our ambition for health and care in Moray. The work on maternity services for Moray, which receives a lot of public and political attention, is part of a wider, critically important project to reaffirm the vital place of Dr. Gray's Hospital in Elgin, and where the place it has in our system of sustainable and modern services. There will be detailed reports on the strategic review of Dr. Gray's Hospital at future board meetings, and the proposed investment in an MRI scanner, which is on the agenda today, is an important symbol of our commitment to Dr. Gray's. We also have the performance report, which shows the continuing stress on our system, and important reports on whistleblowing and a further update on our board assurance framework. We're being asked today to establish the Population Health Committee, which is another example of our willingness to reform how we do our business. That committee will, if approved today, receive assurance on behalf of the board on the prevention, partnership and public engagement work that is required to reform our services to focus on well-being as much as treating ill health. So I look forward to our discussions on these important issues. And now I will hand over to Caroline, our Chief Executive, for her opening remarks. Caroline.
Thanks, John. So I would like to start off my opening remarks by building on John's kind words about Rachel, but actually to acknowledge the contribution of two wonderful colleagues today. So Rachel, our departing employee director, as John has shared, and also Alan Sharp, our departing interim DOF. But I will caveat both of those by saying I'm delighted to say neither of them are going far. So to start with Rachel, Rachel has been our employee director for 4 years, and as John has shared, is handing over this really important and valued role to Stephen. I have received in person and by email so many comments about what Rachel has brought to her board role, and all of them echo my personal view that Rachel, you have surpassed the requirements of the role of employee director and have been the very epitome of what working in true partnership means. I think the values that you work by and demonstrate in every interaction have quite simply provided an exemplary role for us all. As a result, the legacy you're leaving with us, I believe, is vast and impossible to quantify, but I know that Stephen is fit for the job. I wish you all the very best for your future and know that you will continue to have a significant and positive impact in whatever you do next, Rachel. Thank you. So now, Alan. Alan stepped into the role of Interim Director of Finance in March of this year and has supported me, the executive team, the board and his direct and system-wide colleagues with his professionalism, expertise and exceptionally dry sense of humour. As a member of the exec team, Alan has not only fulfilled the technical and professional function of his interim director role, but has stepped into the corporate executive team with a system-wide lens and approach to our collective decision-making. Alan, I believe, has lost no time at all in providing Alex Stevens, our new Director of Finance, who joins us on Monday, with a comprehensive to-do list, and will welcome him with a large smile and open arms, I'm sure. As Alan steps back into substantive post as Deputy DOF, I know that he will continue to support us all in the coming months and years, which I think we can all recognise are going to bring significant fiscal challenges. Thank you, Alan. I wish to also acknowledge within the report, and John has touched on it, the systems pressures which are evidenced in the data that we have shared. And I would encourage all board members to reflect that although you're seeing this in a technical data-driven report, this is about people. It's about the quality of care and care experience for the population of Grampian. It's about how that impacts on our colleagues' health and well-being when they deliver these services every day, and indeed on our financial position. This morning in our closed session, we described our delivery plan, which I look forward to sharing in the October board meeting with the public, which describes our focus on improving access, supporting colleagues and creating the conditions for the future changes that we know we need to make. As I've done in previous board meetings, I wish to extend my thanks and gratitude to all colleagues across health and care for continuing to deliver the best care possible in a very constrained system. I would also like to thank the public for their continued patience and kind words of thanks and support that we receive on a regular basis. To conclude, in and amongst the challenges that I'm sure we will discuss today, just to acknowledge the importance and the great work that has continued in celebrating our colleagues through a range of routes, but the ones that I want to mention today are the Star Awards, the Long Service Awards, and up and running, I believe now, the ability to celebrate and acknowledge colleagues who have contributed significantly and are now moving on to enjoy a much deserved retirement. Thank you, John. I'll just hand back to you now.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, before we move on to the substantive items, can I just remind people that the session is recorded and the intention to post it onto the NHS Grampian website. And if non-board people here today, if I could ask you to keep your camera and microphones off, please. Thank you very much. So if we can go to item 4, which is the minute of our last meeting on the 2nd of June 2022. We have that in the pack, pages 3 to 17. So it was a busy meeting. Can I take it from points of accuracy first, and I'll take it in groups of pages. Is there anything on pages 3 to 7? If people can signal. No, on pages 8 to 12 and 13 to 17. Okay, if we can take that as an accurate minute then, and any matters arising, if there's a matter arising, if you can indicate whereabouts in the minute it applies. Okay, I don't see anybody wanting to raise any matters from the minute. Okay, thank you. So if we can move on to item 5, and that's the Murray Maternity Services and Dr. Gray's strategic plan update. And Jenny, can I pass to you to introduce this item, please?
Yes, you can, John. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to give an update on the progress, particularly around the Murray Maternity Services. So as it states in the paper, the purpose is to give that update, but also to briefly set out the process that will finalise the commission for work to develop the strategic plan for Dr. Gray's Hospital. So as you're all aware, as part of delivering against the recommendations set out in the Rafe Roberts external review for Murray Maternity Services in 2021, planning is underway for the delivery of both Model 4 and Model 6. And whilst these models focus on delivering maternity-related services, there is also a need to have a clear vision for the future role and purpose of Dr. Gray's Hospital as part of the community, as part of NHS Grampian, and as part of a network model in the north of Scotland. And we've got some mention of that in the paper. I just really want to summarise a few points and then take any questions. So a joint plan that was developed between NHS Grampian and NHS Highland for Model 4 was submitted to the Scottish Government, and that's attached as Appendix 1. And we're expecting a response from the Scottish Government to the Model 4 plan when they return after their summer recess. It will be noted that a key feature of the Model 4 is the recommendation that elective caesarean sections should be performed at Dr. Gray's Hospital. But there is a consensus amongst the clinicians at Dr. Gray's in NHS Grampian and also our key partners that this can't be safely offered within the hospital infrastructure for Model 4. And we've given detail of that as part of the draft joint plan. We would look to introduce this as safely as possible, but it will be much closer, we think, to Model 6. And we are in discussion with any alternatives of being able to provide this elective caesarean sections at Highland. Work has commenced to develop the plan for the implementation of Model 6, and it will include indicative timescales for the commencement of services that will remain and become established prior to the full implementation of that model. And again, we've agreed that this will be jointly produced with the NHS Highland, and we'll provide a plan for Model 6 that will meet the outcomes for Dr. Gray's, but I think absolutely vitally will support a sustainable maternity service across the north of Scotland. An example of what we would try to implement between Model 4 moving to Model 6 is increased capacity to provide specialist obstetric care for women who are experiencing a complex pregnancy during their antenatal period. This will reduce the travel commitment for women in Murray, as well as for some women who currently travel from NHS Highland to Aberdeen, for aspects of specialist obstetric care. Another point of note is that the Scottish Government has announced that Dr. Linda de Castecker has been appointed as the external oversight lead, and a meeting with colleagues in NHS Grampian is currently being arranged. And similar meetings have been arranged with NHS Highland teams, and I believe she's meeting with representations from Keep Mum and Maternity Voices Partnership tomorrow. We're continuing to build and enhance our communication and engagement work with women and families in Moray as well as Pan Grampian, and we're working closely with Maternity Voices Partnerships, Moray and Banff, which is a really positive experience, and they give us very valuable input. We're also looking at our maternity website and having that updated and refreshed. We're increasing the social media presence for maternity services, which includes improved signposting and increased support for maternity service communication engagement steering group. And this includes representation from service users. But as we said, we're also looking at part of the developing the strategic plan for Dr. Gray's. I can provide an update. The NHS Grampian Board endorsed the plan for the future at the June meeting, and this included the commitment to develop the strategic plan for Dr. Gray's Hospital, which set out the vision and role for the hospital within the NHS Grampian context. We're undertaking comprehensive engagement with staff and the public, and this is seen as critical in creating the successful plan, and the initial engagement work has started, and emerging themes from this work have already been shared widely. The board will receive a formal update of the development on the strategic plan for Dr. Gray's at its October and December meetings, and a draft commission for this work is attached as Appendix 2. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. So can I open that up for comments and questions on the paper and the appendices that we have? Okay, can I ask you just to say a little bit more? We've got an independent oversight person. Is it to be a group, or is it held in one person who will be providing that oversight, or do we know that yet?
I'm probably slightly uncertain as to what the plan is by the Scottish Government, if I'm honest. We met Dr. de Castecker at a meeting that was held by the Cabinet Secretary, so we've had an initial meeting, but really I'm not aware of too much more information coming out as yet about what this will involve. Okay,
we'll hear that in due course, but she is already making contact with people and
absolutely in both boards and with their as I said, the Maternity Voices Partnership and Keep Mum.
Great. Okay, thank you. Joyce.
Thank you, John. Jenny, I would just like to say thank you for this report, because it provided me with much greater clarity than I'd had before on what the difference was between all of the services by directly putting them next to one another. And I think this is the sort of clarity that helps us all understand where there are challenges, where there are things that we can do quickly, and why we can't do some aspects of it till later on. So I very much appreciated that, and I hope I have a better picture on which to make decisions for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And sorry, I really want to emphasise our commitment, because I know the communities have anxiety about NHS Grampian's commitment to Model 6. I really want to affirm that commitment to Model 6 and the fact that we're progressing towards that. We had a very useful meeting with NHS Highland last night again, and really looking to that joint working together for Model 6 and how we can achieve that sustainable service for women in Moray.
Thank you. Thank you, Joyce and Jenny, for that. And Derek.
Thanks, John. I'd like to just say well done, Jenny. Good report. And what I think needs highlighting is integration between two boards should be relatively simple, but it's not. So I want to congratulate you and congratulate NHS Highland in being able to take this forward. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's probably worth echoing something which was mentioned in our earlier in the private meeting, where we're talking about networked approaches and being able to use this as something which we really do need to be able to develop and do better in the future. So I think it's very welcome that this particular initiative is promoting that. But clearly, success in this will depend on both boards getting an aligned approach which works going forward. So are we assured on the mechanisms that are now in place to bring that? You're mentioning, Jenny, constructive meetings, but we have a firm governance arrangement for picking up any risks or any slippage.
Absolutely. The diagram is contained within the paper. The Joint Maternity Board, that was its second meeting last night and was really constructive and looking at the mutual benefits for both boards, how by coming together we can achieve that. And I think that, as I said, is vital for that sustainable service in the north of Scotland, which will be for Moray, but also for NHS Grampian and NHS Highland. So yes, I feel that with the structure that we've developed and the meetings now in place, then we're in a relatively secure place for governance.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see anybody else signalling, so I just have one other question, and that is the development of our work with the community and the women who will be affected in future. Can you just tell us a bit more about how that's progressing and being formalised?
We have our communication and engagement group, and it's really running in parallel with the work that is around the strategy for Dr. Gray's that Adam is leading on. So we've had quite a few discussions around our engagement with the public and with our staff, and realising Louise Valentine and her team are developing the questions to go out to for women. And in some respects, the maternity aspect, the Model 6 is a fixed point that is there. So how it is we deliver that, and that's what we're asking, not what the end point is going to be, whereas that's slightly different for the Dr. Gray strategy, but very clear that they have to work in parallel and they have to come together. And how we're doing that, our team of engagement officers are working very hard to come up with that plan, and that has already started within Dr. Gray's at the front door, speaking to staff, speaking to service users as they're coming in, and developing that as we move forward. Maternity Voices Partnership are always looking for new representatives to join their group, because we really do use their group as a key group, and so anything that we can do to enhance their who's on that group will be absolutely great, and encourage MD to come forward and be part of that, because that's how we're getting out, but also linking in with all our known pathways within Moray. And I work closely with Simon Boker-Ingram and looking at how we use the existing pathways and existing communications that we actually have, and rather than feeling we have to develop everything from the beginning, but actually what's already in place that we can access, and access women to have their feedback come to us.
Okay, that's great, and I mean, just personally, I can say to the board that having had the opportunity to speak with a number of the community representatives, I found that their contributions were really helpful in a very practical way, and in taking this forward. So, okay, can we then move to page 22, which is the recommendations for the board? There are 4 of them here. So to note the progress that has been made so far, and that's detailed in the Appendix 1. To agree to receive regular updates at future meetings, which are listed in the recommendations there. To note the consultation that's taking place with the Moray stakeholders about the Commission for the Strategic Planning work, and that's set out in Appendix 2, and that we will receive the signed off version of that in due course, and to note the engagement work that has commenced. Can we approve those recommendations today?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny, for that.
Thank you.
If we can go on to the next item, which is National Treatment Centre, Dr. Gray's Hospital MRI scanner. Paul, can I hand over to you for this?
Okay, thank you, Chair. And the order of events is I'm going to do a short presentation, just an introduction, and then we're going to hand over to the team from Dr. Gray's. I think Duff's going to kick us off. At the end of our presentation, we will have Gary Mortimer, our SRO, who will direct questions to the most appropriate team member. So as a reminder, following the approval of the outline business case, we commenced with the National Treatment Centre, Dr. Gray's Hospital MRI project in parallel but separate to the NTC Grampian new build project. Now this work that we're presenting today has progressed with considerable involvement of clinical, non-clinical management input. The business case presented has been extensively developed, as you'll appreciate, a large document, comprehensive with detail. We hope you also appreciate that there are areas where there is still uncertainty, and that primarily relates to essentially the turnaround space for the construction in a safe manner without negatively impacting inpatients at Dr. Gray's. We're hoping that you will do two things. Firstly, we're hoping that you will approve that our wish to progress with the MRI project at Dr. Gray's Hospital, and we are also seeking confirmation that you will expect to receive an addendum at a future board meeting where the final agreement on price, program, construction will be presented. That said, I'm going to hand over now to Duff, who will then take us through with the team, at the end of which Gary Mortimer will direct questions appropriately. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Paul. And as Paul said, we're going to keep this as brief as we can. And I think to echo what he said, we've really had great engagement, which has been noted from all parts from our clinical team and others around the service locally. I think the purpose of this slide is to remind us that this development is part of a NHS Grampian wide development looking at diagnostics, and in this case particularly at the MRI need across the region. And obviously that simple reminder to us all that diagnostics really are the foundation of all of our clinical pathways. It's in the context of escalating waiting lists across NHS Grampian wide, and with our health intelligence team, what we've looked at here are the predictions in our demand up into 2035, and that's based on our activity predictions and our population predictions. And with that across Grampian, there's a suggestion that what we're going to need are 3 additional MRIs. And we've got 3 streams to that. We've got the work at Dr. Gray's Hospital, which we presented today, hopefully for your support. There's further investigation of the possibility of a scanner at Baird and Anchor, and there are those associated with the actual main National Treatment Centre project with the Aberdeen component. Of these, it's likely that the earliest to implement, if approved, would be the one at Dr. Gray's. That's a context for where we are. And I'm going to hand over to Alistair Pattinson, who is going to discuss a bit about the risks that we have around this and the mitigations for those at the moment.
Thanks, Duff. Thanks, Paul. If I can just take you on to this next slide. What the purpose of this slide was really just to orientate the board to where the MR facility is going to be constructed. So this will sit in a selected and preferred location adjacent to the existing radiology department, and that was explored through fairly extensive option appraisal processes, and it was arrived at for a number of reasons, a number of benefits, safety benefits due to medical staffing availability, recruitment opportunities for hybrid radiography staff working within the existing facility, and of course the new facility. It is, however, and highlighted on the slide, close to or adjacent to our Ward 4 and Plus Garden clinics. These are our mental health inpatient and outpatient facilities up at Dr. Gray's. And what we're hearing at the moment, and as Duff was just alluding to, some risks existing as a consequence of the nature of the patients that we're looking after in those areas adjacent to this construction site. There is some concern about the negative impact of noise during the construction phase. So if we move on to the next slide, really just wanted to highlight a few of those risks in a little bit more detail, but also to offer you the mitigations that we've got in place to manage some of those. So these are risks and variables associated with the project, and are really what Paul was suggesting requires the need for us to come back to the board with an addendum once we've got some more clarification around some of these challenges. So there is a workforce risk, as there are with a number of services that we're trying to provide up in Dr. Gray's. However, we do intend to try to get ahead of time with recruitment, and we've got a number of strategies in place to try to secure and attract the workforce to support the delivery of this service, and that will start certainly ahead of time, assuming the proposal is supported, ahead of any construction phase. There is a challenge, as I've said, with regards to the Ward 4 element of this and the outpatient mental health element of this, in so much that we will be required to find a decant option or a relocation option for these services during the construction phase, so as not to disrupt the care that is being provided to those patients at the moment. There is an extensive amount of work going on with mental health services and the wider system to try to arrive at a solution for that, so that we are not holding the construction programme back any later than we would desire to. And of course, as a consequence in and of itself, in terms of delay, there can be an associated, or maybe an associated, cost implication because of some of the volatility within the current market. So it's really just to highlight some of the kind of key things, key challenges that we've still got to contend with around this development for discussion. And I think just going to hand over to Gary now, as Paul said, for any questions from yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. I guess, John, back to you to invite questions from colleagues.
Yes, okay, that's fine. If we can signal for comments and questions on this, please, and then Gary can field those. Can I ask Ian to come in first?
Thanks, John. Just a question on the Ward 4 decant. I presume from what's been said that will be a temporary arrangement rather than a permanent change. What sort of length of time are we expecting that decant to last for?
John, do you wish me to deal with these one by one, or
whichever way you would like, I think.
Yeah, so in response to that one, Ian, there are a number of solutions that we're currently exploring, including use of Royal Cornhill and or use of Ward 7 at Dr. Gray's. That the timeline will be entirely dependent on which of those options are the most suitable for the patient group. Our current estimate is that the Royal Cornhill option is potentially the quickest, and that would become available to patients downstream of October. So it's reasonably short, but there are a number of complications that we're still working through to bottom out, but that will come back as the addendum.
I'd ask a follow-up, John?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. If Royal Cornhill is the decant location, do you see that having a negative impact on families being able to visit patients currently in Ward 4?
I maybe bring Simon in. It's certainly one of the considerations that we're exploring, which is why we're also exploring a Dr. Gray's solution. Simon, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Thanks, Gary, for bringing me in. Yeah, Ian, I think that's a really helpful question. Without a doubt, it will be disruptive if the decant option is Royal Cornhill, but whatever we do, whatever environment we use as an alternative, needs to be safe. One of the other issues that we have in parallel to all of this is that we have more anti-ligature work to do on Ward 4. We would always have had to decant out of Ward 4. We would have had to have emptied that ward in order to do the anti-ligature work. So we can do both. I think the primary importance around mental health is that we need to get the anti-ligature work done, and I think that the MRI scanner work can be done whilst that ward is decanted because of getting the anti-ligature work done. So what it comes down to is then, what is the safest alternative? Is it somewhere that we can make as safe as we need to in Murray, or do we need to use Royal Cornhill because that's the only alternative? I know the team have done extensive exploration. We've gone as far as Highland to see if they've got an alternative, but we're still hopeful we can do something that involves less travel. I think the other opportunity around this would be to look at how do we use the staffing complement that we have in Murray to create more of a robust community service, community-based service, that would mean that we would not, if people need to go to Cornhill, there would be less than we're currently admitting to Ward 4. Hope that helps, Ian.
It doesn't very much, thanks. My original question, I don't think it's been answered, though, is how long is the decant likely to last?
I think the anti-ligature work, I'm going from memory here, was kind of between potentially anything up to 8 months. The MRI work, I don't know, Gary, if you can answer that one, which will give us an idea about how the two work in parallel.
Yeah, Ian, the MRI construction programme is a 12-month programme. We're working with the service. So some of that won't be noisy, disruptive work, so there might be an opportunity to compress that. I suspect the anti-ligature work will be the longer of the two programmes.
Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Okay, thank you. Derek, can you come in?
Thanks, John. I understand that we're going to come back with a update on price, but just wanting to know if the current estimate is still within the bounds of acceptability to the Scottish Government. That's one. And two, an extra 11 whole-time equivalents added onto the revenue. Are the government going to allow us to do that as well by helping fund us?
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I'm going to ask Alan Sharp to respond to that, please.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Derek. So in terms of the capital cost, the estimated 5.5 million, that is the figure that we've been advising of the Scottish Government of for a considerable time now. As others have pointed out, there is a risk around the volatility of construction prices at the moment, and that's why we want to bring an addendum back, because we do expect that to be under pressure as the project develops and prices continue to be volatile. So 5.5 million is not a surprise to the Scottish Government. It was part of our original funding package for the overall NTC, National Treatment Centre project. In terms of the revenue costs, we are putting those into our funding submissions to the Scottish Government around their waiting times funding. We've already included 400,000 this year in order to take on staff in advance of the project construction being completed, because it's vitally important that we source and train those staff so that we have a workforce ready to operate the facility when it commences. The total costs, the total revenue costs, are anticipated to be about £1.1 million a year, and they will be included in our annual funding bids for waiting times funded to the government. So the assumption is that the government will cover those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions on the demographics. I think, Duff, you showed us the graph with the growth of demand for the MRI. I just wanted to assure myself that the sources of data you use are reasonably reliable, so the machine, the kit, will get good usage, will get good value for money from it. And I think related to that, are we looking at, I know Elgin's fairly good for public transport, but I'm just wanting to check out that we're looking at public transport links from outlying areas for those people who are travelling in for that service.
So I apologise, I've got a fire alarm in the background, so I hope that doesn't come through too loudly. With the demographics, we worked these through with our local team with Graham Osler, that many of you will be aware of. We helped support this through both the initial work prior to the COVID pause, and we then reviewed all of that data after that pause. As you can see, he worked it out both on the predictions from activity and from the predictions and demographics. And the line that we've used as our main predictive line is a model line between those. So we've checked that almost in two timelines, from the pre and in the post pandemic stage. So we're confident with that data. From the point of view of the transport, we took a little step back with some of our NDAP and sustainability work that we had to do, looking at the architectural and building reassurance, with Susan Grant working with us for that. And during that, we did pay heed to looking at those transport access links, and including the public transport. So those are things that we've been looking at, aware of, and working through. And I apologise for the bells.
I think we can hear that, so it's okay. Amy, is that okay? Yeah.
That's helpful, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Gary, I see that June and Adam are looking to come in. Are you looking to contribute to these questions?
No, I think that was a good answer from Duff.
Yeah, and June.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious in relation to the radiographer recruitment. As we all know, that DGH has had issues for a long time now in relation to recruiting radiographers, and obviously MRI is a post-graduation qualification, as is CT, and the opportunity that brings to have triple modality, if you like, radiographers within Dr. Gray's, and just really interested in that recruitment opportunity there is there, and how will you attract people? Will there be extra opportunities around about education or research for them so that we can attract them to Moray? Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. So there's been loads of work around the workforce plan and recognition of that recruitment risk. I'll maybe ask Fidelma to give a little bit more detail on that.
Sure, thanks for that. Yeah, so you're right, workforce is a continuing issue, and we've done some really thorough work with the radiology department. They have already reached out and have a well-established process with the universities around Aberdeen. So getting undergraduates into work on the ARI site as kind of like radiographer support assistants, that has proven to be really successful in terms of when those undergraduates finish their studies and are looking for permanent posts. So we're looking to continue with that. We've developed using the 6-step methodology around workforce planning. So we're happy that our workforce plan is thorough, and there's also some external scrutiny around the numbers coming from the Scottish Government. And we're also linking to I suppose study requirements and what's needed outside of the full-time, working posts that as you allude to. So the cross-modality working is substantially attractive to the existing radiographers as well in terms of enhancing their current posts.
Maybe just to add to that, June, we're also working with Stuart Humphreys and his team around how do we positively market this, bringing posts online as quickly as we can. But it's a brand new service, so hopefully it will have an attraction in itself.
John, you're on mute.
Yeah, the sticky buttons come this way now. Okay, thank you. Adam?
Yeah, thanks, John. I was going to just make a general point, but very seriously, I just think, Duff, if your fire alarm's still going off, you should leave and go to the muster point, and I'm sure we can get any questions for you when you return. I just think that's an important thing to do. So, John, yeah, I just wanted to make a general point about trying to link the last paper and the bit of strategic planning for Dr. Gray's with the development of the MRI, and it kind of echoes a bit of your introductory comment about investment and the importance of Dr. Gray's in the Grampian system. So a key bit of what we're trying to do in the strategic plan is set out an incredibly positive and exciting future for Dr. Gray's that networks really clearly between Inverness and Aberdeen, and produces and provides a load of activity locally as well. And I think the MRI is just a really good example of that, of how it provides, you know, a key new facility, absolutely illustrating the importance of Dr. Gray's as a district general hospital, providing, you know, greater depth of service than it currently does. But that real critical bit, which is in the paper described really nicely, that Gary and team have produced, that shows the network path of the MRI scanner within the Grampian population. So it was just to make that general comment. I'm sure everyone had done it and joined up the dots, but I just thought it was important to say it out loud.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, Adam, to emphasise that point. Can we go on to Anne, please?
Hi, Gary. Mine's a very practical question about the actual MRI scanner. Will it be suitable for people who are very claustrophobic? Because if it's not, then they're still going to have to travel into Aberdeen to the Craig unit. So it's a very practical question from somebody who is very claustrophobic. So when you have the chance to actually put in a new piece of kit, will it be suitable for people who are? Thank you very much.
Really good question, Anne, and I don't know the answer to it, but I'm sure Duff, who hasn't burned in the flames, can give us the clinical view on that.
I can give a slightly less anxious looking response this time. So this it's going to be a standard 1.5 Tesla scanner, and so it won't be one of the open types of scanners, which I believe what you're referring to, which there's access to one at Wood End. So I think for patients who have particular problems with claustrophobia, it may still be that's something that they will have to travel for. So that obviously we're trying to make the pathway and the service as suitable for everyone locally as we can.
Okay, thank you. And Joyce?
Thanks, John. I take on board what Adam said about a positive picture for the future. But I would like to know, do we struggle at the moment to get radiography staff in Dr. Gray's and in Aberdeen? And I realise that you have work in place to try and improve on this, but are we being realistic? Or are we just trying to paint a positive picture because that looks better for everyone? So that's my first question. And my second question is around some of the comments that were in the report about the usage from the population, because Grampian is a strange place. We're all strange people in Aberdeenshire, because we don't gravitate north, we gravitate towards the city. And certainly coming from living in Inverurie, it would take me an hour and a half to get to Elgin. It takes me half an hour to get to Aberdeen. So I would never think of going to Elgin except for a day out in the summer. And I would certainly never want to go there for a bit of treatment. And not that there's anything bad about the treatment there, but it's just not my natural reaction. And I think I will be the same as many people. So how are we going to change the population's mind about the fact that this is the better place to go, despite the fact it'll take longer, it'll cost more, and it'll take more time out of your life if you're having to go on a regular basis for pre-treatment, the diagnosis and post-diagnosis reviews. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. I'll maybe bring in Alistair on the specifics of the Dr. Gray's staffing issues, and maybe Fidelma can supplement that. and in relation to the usage, maybe Fidelma can pick up at that point as well. But to be clear, Joyce, it'll be, you know, both options will be available for patients, so that there's something about proximity and logistics there, isn't there? So this is part of the solution. It won't be the only solution for patients in Inverurie. And when you look at the demographics, you know, there's a short-term pool of patients out with the Moray area, but as that demand goes up, it'll become much more concentrated around Moray over the longer term. But maybe Alistair, can you pick up on the staffing bit?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I mean, if I can stick with radiographers specifically rather than going into a wider Dr. Gray's staffing discussion, that will save time for sure. We have had some challenges, Joyce, with radiography staffing, but actually more recently we've been really successful and have recruited almost half a dozen radiographers more recently to join the team, and a new radiography manager who has got some great experience, in fact came from Highland, so has some good experience in terms of recruitment strategies to her previous part of the system. And as Fidelma said before, I think within our existing cohort, we've got some real opportunities to develop and grow, enhance the skills of those that are already there to help service this facility. And with the wider piece of work going on and the development in and of itself, and perhaps some careful and clever marketing strategies, I remain really optimistic and positive that we will secure radiography staff, which has been a difficulty up to this part of the country, this part of the board area, if you like, as we go forward. So not such a bad position from a staffing point of view as it has been in the past.
Thank you. That gives me much greater confidence in the written word. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Then Gary, we've got Adam and then Caroline. Adam?
Yeah, thanks very much, John. Alistair's answered that really well. I just take it up kind of one level or a slightly broader picture back to the strategic intent for Dr. Gray. So, you know, in discussion with a large staff cohort there through what's called their senior staff committee, there is a sense that the more we can nail down a real clear future for Dr. Gray's, giving absolute clarity to all the services about the aspiration and the vision for the hospital and therefore the services within it, and make it really clear how people can work in that network basis between different sites, particularly I think the Inverness and Elgin one. That is all part of both retaining people and recruiting them. So there's something about making individuals' roles really exciting and giving them the depth of experience and things to do. So it links really well to Jenny's bit about, you know, how we recruit the people to run an obstetric-led service. So that whole bit about how we create that real certainty for something that's really exciting all helps with that retention of our current group, and absolutely then has an enthusiastic and positive sense of what's there, and therefore why you'd want to come and work there. So it is a virtuous cycle that we've got to create through this bit of planning work.
Thanks, Adam. And Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I welcome, Joyce, your honesty and your reflection, and I think the thought process that you have as an individual, I'm sure many other members of the public will have that. But actually, the questions that you posed are the questions that many of the citizens of Moray will ask themselves about every time we ask them to travel to Aberdeen City. So I think that we have a real leadership imperative and responsibility around. And there is a direct correlation between the paper that Jenny presented and the commitment to Model 6 and the wider opportunity around Grays. And that is going to require us to think differently and behave differently in the way we have historically in regards to how we make decisions about where care is provided. And we are incredibly thoughtful of that. But I think the conditions and the opportunity that we have at the moment in regards to the support from Scottish Government, the support from national organisations such as NES, to work with us to address the concerns that you have around sustainability of workforce, Scottish Government particularly around supporting us with those national discussions, but also the financial requirements, which is going to take us to the end of year position in the work that Adam's doing. We have to give this everything possible to understand what will it take to deliver sustainable services in that part of the geography. And you've heard the words today around networked and having real areas of focus where people can celebrate and be proud of the work they do. And things like MRIs are an absolute, MRIs innovation are an absolute attractor to the workforce that we want to recruit and retain. So really welcome the challenge, and I think it's a thought process that we need to continually revisit to make sure we are doing everything possible to answer those concerns, but not just for the population of citizens in city, from the perspective of Moray citizens as well.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. And I think in our last meeting, when we were looking at National Treatment Centre, we were looking at beyond Aberdeen, so that we're looking at the whole of Grampian and the implications for the whole population across all of these items. Thank you. Paul, can I bring you back in?
Yeah, just a comment around Joyce's question around the utilisation of the MRI scanner and whether or not it could be adequately supported. I think one of the things, Joyce, I too had that concern back when Graham Smith and others were starting the conversations many years ago around whether we should have an MRI scanner there. So I too had that concern. But I think currently the work that we're doing around pathways and understanding which imaging modality is superior when both are equivalent. You know, we have MRI, we have CT scanning. You know, so there's a lot to be done at the moment in terms of optimizing the safest, least radiation costing investigation in managing individuals, not only at the diagnostic point, but many of these citizens in that area, that footprint, require lifelong surveillance. So cumulatively, as we start to do more precision medicine and tailored medicine and individual programs of surveillance, I suspect we will find that there's a shift from current imaging modalities to less ionizing radiation imaging and for longer. So I think the concerns I had earlier are no longer concerns really, because I think we're going to look to shift what we use and how we use it and for how long we use it on an individual patient. So I think it'll be well used.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think, Gary, that brings us to through the questions, and it's just worth noting that this needs to be a fair number of questions on that item for the current board members. This is our first look at this particular item, so we've gone into that in some depth. So thank you everybody for that. Now we move to the recommendations, which are on page 43. We've got two of them. We're asked to approve the standard business case for the development of the MRI and to confirm a requirement to bring back further details to a future board meeting once we have final agreement on price and programme prior to proceeding to the construction. So are we able to approve both of these today?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. And can I thank the five of you, Paul, Duff, Alistair, Fidelina and Gary for your contributions on that item. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
If we can move to the performance report next, and is Kate going to lead on this item? Yeah, if I can ask Kate for you to come in and introduce it.
Thank you, John. As Caroline and John both outlined in their opening remarks to this meeting, the system pressures continue to challenge us. The risks continue to be managed the very best way they possibly can be on a daily and sometimes hourly basis. However, as a result of this continuing pressure, we know the impact on colleagues' wellbeing across the whole system continues, and this remains a high priority area of focus for us. You will also note in the paper the oversight of quality and patient care is via the weekly clinical risk meeting. As our chair mentioned in his opening remarks, the board discussed the draft delivery plan this morning, and reflecting the performance as described in the system pressure pack you have, the absolute focus set out in that delivery plan for us in the next 7 months is rightly on reducing delays in accessing care, supporting colleagues to be safe and well at work, and creating the conditions for sustainable change in the future. I would ask the board, following our previous conversations, to note that this is the last time this format of performance reporting will come to the board meeting. We are working now on bringing a first version of an integrated quality and performance report, and that will come to the meeting of the board on the 6th of October. We will be looking for feedback and input from the board to develop that together over probably the next 6 months. I anticipate at every board meeting we will be building in a stepped approach to a new exemplar report that covers the information needed by the board and in a format that is easy to understand and helpful to use. I'm going to stop there and hand back to Caroline to direct any questions on performance to the relevant executive leads. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Kate, and we look forward to the further development of this process as it goes forward. I'm aware of conversations taking place which I think have been quite productive to date. Derek, can I bring you in first on this item?
Hi, thanks, John. Taking on board that the thing is going to change, so my comment might be appropriate, but the pages 149 to 151 give across the 3 council areas the information, and on the right hand side we've got a narrative for each area. I was just thinking it would be much easier to compare one to the other if the narrative was the same. So the first piece of narrative was the same across each one, the second piece of narrative was the same across each one. That would make it simpler to do a direct comparison. So I don't know if that's going to be relevant going forward, but if it is, maybe we could think about that. Thank you.
Okay, any comments on that?
Just to say, really helpful, Derek, and absolutely what our planning has been around is, and as I said, making the format as easy to use and helpful to use. So very much how we display the information will be critical. I'm not saying we'll get it absolutely right, and that's why we will need to develop it and look for your input to it, but really helpful and aligns with our thinking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Sandy?
I suppose just closing the loop for Kate in relation to 2.3.4 on page 3 of the report in terms of risk, and that last sentence there, just to confirm there's a good discussion on the risk escalation system at Audit Committee on Tuesday. Both Nick and Mike provided a useful overview of what is currently in place and how it's going to evolve. So just to confirm to the board that has actually happened, and we've supported the development of the proposed approach to risk appetite, and I agreed to the commencement of a review of the strategic risk register. So that was a very helpful discussion, and progress has been made in relation to risk.
Thank you for sharing that, Sandy. That's helpful. And Joyce?
Thanks. Just to say, I think this data has been very useful while we've had it, and we've probably learned a great deal from it. But it is backward looking-ish, and I am assuming that the future data will be reflective of both the past and what we're doing to work towards our future strategy. But can we also, with this, start to look at what we need to ask of government? Because we're not getting anywhere continually having targets which are meaningless in many ways, because we may not be treating the people who need to be treated first. And we are spending time doing things that are not adding value for our population. And I do believe that we should be asking questions and trying to influence change in that way. And I'd like to see and hear more about what boards are doing together to help that go forward. Thanks.
Okay, great question, Joyce. Caroline?
Yeah, really good point, Joyce. And actually, it's made me think. So the tiered intelligence piece of work that Kate and the project team that are around that are working on is to make sure that the data pushes us to have the right discussions. And I think we've discussed several times that the data we're sharing in this report, whilst it's absolutely had its use, it's very operational and perhaps doesn't enable us to have the level of discussion that we would be required to have to put us in a position as a board that potentially at the end of a performance conversation, we would be saying, actually, these are the things that we would like to either through John as the chair or myself as the chief exec or us as a board to seek guidance and input from Scottish Government on key issues. I think at the moment how we're doing that is individually through our professional routes into the government, and John and I will discuss key issues and how we want to influence nationally and work with the government on the impact and consequences of particular things. So I think the correlation between the data that we look at, the conversation that pushes us to have, and the decisions we make out of that, it's a really good question for us to see as one of those things. So what is the national feedback we want to put in to work with government to understand the context of Grampian? So I think that should be a core part of our discussion going forward.
Thank you. Joyce, did you want to come back on that? No, maybe just sort of building on that, I'm wondering if there's anything you can share, Caroline, or other members of the team, just about work, because this indicates what performance is against targets, but understanding root causes of pressures and problems. Is the work that can be done is being done on that aspect?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the things that we've talked about in the way that this report is presented is that it's a very detailed description of the problem, but there isn't the information that you require to be assured around. So what is it that we are doing to move that forward? So that will come forward in our future reporting process. However, specifically, I wonder if it would be useful for the board to hear, and I am either going to go to Pam or Nick on the data analysis that is underway to help us tell the story and understand some of the causal factors of why we are where we are, and then go to Paul to talk through one of the pathways, be that urgent care, where there is specific work ongoing at the moment, or planned care. And I think Pam's popped her hand up, so perhaps we'll go to Pam.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Yes, so we've commissioned a piece of work to look at really what the activity looked like before COVID, and then to understand the pressures that we're feeling after COVID, now that we've got maybe activity levels which are not dissimilar, but yet the pressure on the system is extremely high. And that may be around patient acuity. It's also that we know that during COVID we changed the flow around the system. So for example, the way that individuals access urgent care changed through COVID. So we know that we've made some changes in both systems and processes during the last couple of years. And what we need to understand is, what are the elements that are putting pressure on our systems? Is it around the kind of health debt, acuity? Is it around some of the system changes? Is it also around some of the workforce changes? So may have very tired workforce now that maybe are less resilient. So what we've done is we are both looking at the data, but also Health Intelligence are meeting with groups of staff to say, what do they feel has changed? And then what we will do is track that against the data. So to try and understand what they're feeling intuitively has been different and what system changes we've made, and then to try and understand, have they had an impact on the system? Because what we need to know is really about how we can relieve some of the pressure on the system and meet our demand. But in order to do that, we need to understand, really, there's so much changes that's taken place across the system. What are the things which are having the biggest impact? So the aim is to do it as a bit of an iterative work. So we've got the first data should be coming, analysis should be coming back mid-August, and then we'll keep learning from that to try and pin down where the areas we can focus on, acknowledging at the same time we're also still making changes in the system currently, which we need to try and track and match to see what their impact is.
Okay, thanks, Pam. So what I'm hearing is that's evidence informed, but people's experience is a key aspect of that, and I think that's a very mature way of handling it. Nick, did you want to add anything to that before I bring Paul in?
Yeah, it was sort of to try and offer a segue between Pam and Paul, because I think the sense we're getting, so that analysis is going to be really important. We've got a sense that our systems become too complicated. We've got a sense of that. We've got a sense that there's a lot of what one would call failure demand. So someone goes one place and they don't get the right solution, so they go to another place. We've got a sense that our pathways have too many handoffs, and we've recognized that we essentially have some form of queuing at every point in the pathway from home all through the hospital system back to home. So I guess that's the sense we have. The analysis will tell us a lot more about the detail around that, but that means that we tee up some thoughts about what we do, and this is to bring Paul in, because if we take too long over the analysis, and then we'll be too late to sort of make changes. So there's that sense of trying to work on all three things at once. So that's my segue to give Paul some thoughts around urgent stroke emergency care and that sort of work.
Yeah, thank you, Nick and Pam and Joyce. Just to reassure, some of the work's already been done, for instance, in planned care. So by having over a period of time a very different approach to the data, being much more inquiring and getting to a root cause approach as opposed to this is the performance. I think it's that approach that's allowed us to have a very different communication with the operational access arm of Scottish Government, whereby now they are mobilizing nationally resourced to help level out the difference in performance. That's been exaggerated over the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic. So it is, in fact, this data that's driven our thinking and our conversations, to a degree influencing Scottish Government to this policy change. So I think, we are there. There's more to be done. And on the second bit that I think that Nick and Pam have mentioned, I think through the understanding of the emergency data set, the front door, if you like, we now know that the front door, it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be redesigned. And in fact, what we have is emergency and we have urgent care, very different groups, very different pathways, but they collide with one another and cause a series of demand failures throughout. So what the portfolio leads have done together with their teams and in a significant amount with Michael Coulthard, who's our project manager, have really started to put together a tactical group who have sort of thrashed out what urgent care requires in terms of the planning and the identification of changes. Having done that piece of work, we've now embarked today, in fact, on a series of Connect meetings, and I think they run between, here we are, the 4th of August and the 28th of September. A series of Connect meetings open to the entire of our system to help contribute to how do we change that sort of approach to managing the front door, and in particular how we identify urgent care from emergency care, so we get the right patients in the right pathways, whether they're in hospital, community settings, or elsewhere. So that piece of work is now very much underway, and that's coming to a conclusion towards the end of September. So this data, it's the same data, but I think, as we've said, very different approach to working with the data. So I hope that helps you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think what that does is start to place the performance discussion and the scrutiny and the assurance that we can have in quite a different place, from screeds of data and interrogating individual bits and pieces to looking at what the problem is, and so what is going to happen, and then being able to see how that progresses. And I also think, picking up on, I think Amy had raised it earlier about the public's perception, almost in a nutshell, it's having reliable access in fact and in perception, so that people go to the right place, and at the moment we're probably not there. Joyce.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to say thank you very much, because there's incredibly important information there, which demonstrates to me that the leadership of this organisation has transformationally changed the way it looks at things over the last few years. And through their ability to do that and see things differently, that will then filter down through the rest of the staff, and we'll be able to explain it more fully to the public to see why things have to change and why services will be different. So I really see a big step change in what that data has done for us. So thank you very much for the explanations today.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. That's very helpful way of summarising that. So Kate, yeah, building on how this will work through in future reports, I think that conversation has been really helpful to help shape that, and we'll be able to see what comes to the performance committee and what comes to the board, and that can get teased out in due course. So we've got recommendations on page 133, and if we can just go to that quickly. We've got two there. We've reviewed and scrutinised the report, noted the position across the system, and being asked if we are assured that all is being done to meet the objectives, all that can be done at this point in time. That's one point. And then to note that we've got the development of this reporting coming through into future meetings. So are we able to have the assurance on this item that's being asked for?
Agreed. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So can we move on to the next item, which is the Whistleblowing Annual Report, item 8, page 154 on the pack. Adam, who do you want to introduce this report?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. So Louise Valentine, our head of engagement, who I'm sure everyone knows Louise. She's been at the board lots of times and was key in so many things. Louise, I guess I'd just like to start off, John, by saying, a really huge thanks to Louise, who's just done a power of work on whistleblowing over its first year of the new standard, and kind of bearing in mind that as we started it last April, as in 18 months ago, we were right in the middle of a phase of pandemic, and Louise worked really well with lots of teams to get this to stick, and the annual report's in front of you. So Louise is going to just run us through the report, and then Bert, as the whistleblowing champion, is keen just to say something, John, if that's okay. So I'll just hand on to Louise and she'll give us some highlights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Good afternoon, everyone. So just to really give you a bit of an overview of the content of the report, I know you'll have had the chance to have a look through it, but just as a bit of a recap, over the first year of us working to the new whistleblowing standards, we received 14 concerns which met the criteria. All of these concerns were managed at stage 2, which meant they went to a full investigation, and they were all handled and concluded within an average of 40 working days for the ones that have concluded already. For those concerns, half of them came in around NHS Grampian provided services, and half of them came in around health and social care partnership provided services. The staff groups that raised them, there were 6 nurses, 5 office-based, 2 medical staff and 1 care assistant, so a bit of a range of staff. However, it was noted that there was no staff from facilities and estates groups, and after checking in with some colleagues and other boards, this is something that's quite common and is an area that we're making sure that we focus on for next year around making sure that awareness is raised and people know how to and can come forward with any concerns from those areas in particular. The concerns raised, the nature of them, 8 of them had been about staff behaviours or colleagues' behaviours. 11 had a patient safety aspect to it, which again is what we would expect with it being the criteria is mainly the concern that is kind of what they're about. There was also 5 about management behaviours and 5 about management not taking action in a way that was felt that they should. The outcome of the concerns of we had 1 of those fully upheld, 5 of them partly upheld, and 2 of them were not upheld. And the way that that's been worked out is there was an average of 3 concerns raised or 3 issues raised within each concern. So if you imagine somebody's maybe come forward to say that they're unhappy that colleagues' behaviours, management behaviour and perhaps lack of management action, that would be 3 separate issues. It might be that 1 of those was found to be below what we would expect. The other 2 might have been that we found we have been reassured, in which case that would be termed as a partly upheld concern. There are still, as I said, some concerns outstanding, which is why that number doesn't fully add up to the full amount that had come in. Other than that, just so that we know of the ways that concerns can come in, we had 6 of those raised through our online form. This was a mechanism that we created within NHS Grampian in addition to those recommended by the Scottish Government. So it's something that staff can just click on the intranet or through any links that are promoted in other ways, but also through a QR code on posters that were put around different premises. So it meant people could just link straight in and just fill in their details, and that would go straight to the confidential whistleblowing email account to be managed and for contact to be made, but also that 6 concern raisers directly contacted confidential contacts, which again is promoted through the website and on posters of how they can do that. Also 2 members of staff felt using the phone was the best way, so it's good that we do have a range of ways for that to happen. The key sort of actions then, or key focus for going forward, we realise that we really do need to raise awareness of the standards, recognising, as Adam had said, trying to introduce it at a time when staff were working in different areas, redeployed and lots of pressure. That staff, this will have gone over a lot of staff's heads, and really just trying to make sure there's that understanding as well. We mentioned about training in the report, and that's something that again has been challenging for staff to undertake. We had about 400, just over 400 staff in total had undertaken the 40-minute TURAS training module, which obviously is quite a long time commitment, but that's something we can maybe think about promoting, more short videos and things for people to understand the key parts of it, and as well as knowing that there is standards, what that means and how people can raise them. So we'll do some work around that. Additionally, we've got coming up Speak Up Week. This is something that's being led by the Independent National Whistleblowing Officer. And this is going to be the 3rd to 7th October and is really about promoting and celebrating that we want people and value people coming forward. As part of that in NHS Grampian, we're now setting up to have a new Speak Up Ambassador and Advocate model. This is based on NHS Lothian's model. They've had this in place now for a year or 2, and it's something that they find is a really good way to have staff across the system in a variety of roles, which means that all staff will know this is your local Speak Up ambassador, or be able to go and see on the internet, for example, what Speak Up ambassadors there are, but actually what their kind of areas of interest are, if it's race, if it's about whistleblowing, if it's about bullying and harassment. So really just building in that there's a host of people who are there as an empathetic first point of contact. Another thing that we're looking at as well is, as one of the key things this year, is just really the resource consideration of whistleblowing. As it's mentioned in the report, it is a very time-considering, complex area, and it is something that has taken a considerable amount of time. Often with concerns, there's maybe 6 meetings that take place, just giving updates and making sure we understand fully the concerns and supporting, and also to conclude what's happened. We know that in Lothian, they have 26,000 staff, so a bit of a bigger workforce than ours. However, they've got 0.8 whole-time equivalent confidential contacts who that is all they do. So a day and a half, 3 different people have that as a role, whereas in Grampian at the moment, we've got it as add-on roles for people. So again, it's maybe just looking at what sort of resource and support we might need in this, especially as we raise more awareness. We know that numbers are likely to increase. So again, it's just making sure that as we encourage that we can continue to provide the support that we've managed to do in this year. And just the final next steps as well that's mentioned in the sort of conclusion part of the report that we do need to be mindful of a board that we're doing is making sure that we have finished confirming the arrangements of the health and social care partnerships, whether they're going to extend the whistleblowing arrangements for local authority staff. So that's something that still has to be fully concluded and reported on. That all contracts have got the whistleblowing standard requirements written into them across primary care and other contracted services. That, as we said, that we have enough confidential contacts in the system and that they can be supported by this ambassador model, which requires having an external agency come in to do training. And finally, that as mentioned, the hosting and management and coordinating of whistleblowing, that we can ensure that we've got the resource to continue giving this the time that it needs. So I'll stop there, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. And Bert, are you wanting to come in just now?
Yes, I will, Chair. Thank you. And I'm going to keep my camera off if I may, just because of problems with the connectivity. So I think as the board's whistleblowing champion, I would want us to take an opportunity with this first annual report to the board to offer some of my own thoughts and observations. But firstly, can I just add to Adam's remarks regarding Louise's input and those of her colleagues over the past year and a bit. The introduction to the implementation of the standards wasn't without its challenges, mainly because of the focus on the system pressures due to COVID. But progress has been made, although there remains work to be done to achieve full implementation. It is, of course, a journey, and at the end of year 1, I felt it was appropriate just to pause and reflect on where we had got to and what yet needs to be done. I think firstly I would want to say that although there has been a considerable amount of work done regarding communication, and indeed there was a communication strategy, I think we need to revisit this. Communication is really important to highlight to staff about the standards and how to go about reporting a concern. There are some important parts in there about the reporting methodology, and that comes down to knowing that when you report a concern, you will be supported at every stage of the process, and that everything is done confidentially. And we need to try and reiterate that to staff, to give them the confidence to come forward when they feel it's important to do so, to report things through the whistleblowing standards. And not everything needs to come through the whistleblowing standards. There are other means of dealing with this, but the whistleblowing standards are there for a particular purpose. Of course, raising awareness may lead to an increase in the number of concerns being brought forward. But it's important to create a culture that encourages this to happen. One of the things I wanted to do to raise awareness is to get a sense of the temperature of the organisation in relation to culture, and to do so, and to get that sense is to be carrying out visits to different parts of the organisation. Now, this has been difficult to achieve, quite understandably, because of all of the difficulties that we've been experiencing. But what I can say is that I now have dates in the diary over the next month or so to commence these visits. Louise alluded to training on the whistleblowing standards, and there are modules on TURAS that people can avail themselves of. The take-up has been low. I don't think that's confined to NHS Grampian. I think that might be reflected across the country. But staff will learn more about the standards by undertaking these online modular training formats. And I think it's especially important for members of staff who will be carrying out investigations to make use of these modules. There remains work to be done to give us the assurance about the implementation of the standards across a range of the system. I think we need to continue our work in relation to health and social care partnership, which Louise alluded to, with private contractors as well, so that we are satisfied that there is appropriate mechanisms in place and that there is also appropriate governance in these areas. And I think these are things that we really need to think about going forward. I think it's important also to mention the linkages with culture and the wider culture agenda in the organisation, because I believe that there should be a strong link with culture for the simple reason that if we are to have a culture which supports someone coming forward to raise a concern, then that linkages need to be there. The numbers in year one have been low, as we've heard, a total of 24, of which 14 have met the criteria. And because these numbers are so low, I think it's just far too soon to be identifying any meaningful trends. But learning from these concerns, for me, is hugely important. And we need to do a bit more work, I think, in relation to having a method which ensures that the learning is appropriately shared. I think it's also fair to say that these investigations can be really, really time-consuming. Some of the concerns raised can be very complex, and it is very difficult to meet the standards of timescales for completion of investigations that are laid down in the standards. I think, just finally, in looking ahead, other than what I've talked about in relation to the health and social care partnership with private contractors and so on and so forth, I think there's aspects of internal management that we need to be looking at, which links into governance and scrutiny as well, of course. For example, who in the organisation actually owns whistleblowing? Where is the ownership of that resting? What admin processes are there in place to support the whole whistleblowing process? I think we need to be removing the confidential contacts from the concern handling process, and I think there needs to be an increase in the number of confidential contacts to deal with concerns and to add to resilience, because the resilience isn't there at this time. I think we need to look at the process, about who decides about the learning from concerns, where that learning is taken to. And I think finally, the robustness of the DATIC system, which does feature in the reporting process, is something that needs to be looked at again, and I know that there is work underway in relation to that. So just finally, progress has been made. I think good progress has been made, but there remains work to be done. And I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bert, and appreciate your systems. Your connection is a problem at the moment. We managed to catch that. There was quite a lot of interference and feedback on the line, so just for you to be aware of that if you're trying to set things up. I think though that we heard all that you wanted to say. On page 158 of the report, the whistleblowing champion independently, which is yourself, needing to be assured that the board is taking the steps to encourage, value and respond. So I think with the outline that you've given us, you're indicating that we're on a journey in the right direction, and that there's more to be done in year 2. So I'm assuming when we get to our recommendations that we're taking some assurance from you that we're moving forward as we should be. We've got a couple of questions which I'll take, and then I'll move to the recommendations. So Kim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if you covered this because my headphones were giving me a jip there, but around the TURAS thing, it was just a suggestion really, because I just had a quick look whilst you were talking, and it's not under the recommended and it's certainly not pushed, and I wonder if that could be done, because that would really help. Although it is a problem with a lot of the mandatory training, it's not, you have to go searching for it until you've done it for the first time, but that might help, because as a manager I wasn't actually aware that we should probably be doing this and encouraging that. And the other thing was, Louise, I was just wondering, so great about the support and people feeling really supported through the process. And you said, you know, that the concerns were upheld, but obviously without going into detail of anything in particular, but when you say the concern was upheld, then what? Because I'm sort of thinking about the person and how supported they may have felt after that, or around the feedback, whether, you know, that being upheld actually made a difference. But I don't really know what happens when you say upheld, good, but what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. It's been good being able to be really part of the process this first year and be one of the confidential contacts, to be able to have had that contact throughout. And I know that for some people at the end, when we have said that, you know, that we have found that this is an area that has fallen below, that this is something that shouldn't have happened, that has happened, and it was about, it had impacted them, although there was a wider kind of impact also. And they felt, you know, quite upset, you know, that what, but in a sense they were also a bit relieved, because I think they felt, well, I'm glad I wasn't just making it up. I'm glad it wasn't just, you know, because I think for people to come forward, it takes an awful lot of courage. I think sometimes people are very unhappy before they come forward. You know, there's maybe often been a final trigger that's been there for them. So it's often not just been a current experience, it's maybe been something that's been 2-3 years. So I think for them it was relief that it was true and it wasn't just in their head, but I think also a bit of sadness, and I think that was the realization was, you know, we can't take away that experience from somebody, you know, and that's the thing, if that's been their experience and it's, you know, an apology, you know, doesn't all, like you say, doesn't always make that better. One of the things that people have felt has really made a difference is that they felt listened to, and they felt that we have taken it seriously and that we have taken action where we can. And so we do feedback to them what action we take. And so when people are told, you know, it's been upheld, we say, and as a result, there's going to be additional training, or this member of staff is going to be supported, there's going to be this happening. So obviously we don't say anything about individual circumstances. We will just, and sometimes it is that a further review is now being taken with that individual, and any actions or follow-up will be taken, and we give them the assurance that we will make sure that that, you know, happens. So even though we don't find out what's happened, we would seek to be assured by that manager that the steps have been followed up in action and HR process has been followed, if that's what's happened as a result. So that tends to be the information they get, and that does help them feel like they can see what's going to happen as a result of them coming forward.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. And if I could just echo the thanks from Adam and Bert to Louise for the significant amount of work that's done. I don't actually have a question, it's more a comment. It was just to say that I have been extremely fortunate to be able to attend the discussions through the Staff Equality Network regarding the Speak Up Ambassador model. And I am really encouraged by the sharing of good practice and the sharing of the lessons learned. And it's not, NHS Grampian's approach is not picking up a model from somewhere else and trying to make it fit. It's absolutely about looking at how will it fit for NHS Grampian, which is so encouraging, and I feel it absolutely fits with what we're trying to do in terms of our culture work. But also, just to pick on the speak up element, I think it links back to some of our discussions earlier on about our use of terminology and trying to make things as easily understandable for everyone. And I think the speak up element is going to be really helpful in trying to take that forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. So can we move to the recommendation? So on page 155, we're asked to agree that we're assured that the whistleblowing standards are being implemented effectively. I think we're doing that in relation to the comments that have been made in terms of the progress that we have, and agree to receive quarterly reports in line with the requirements of the standards. If we can agree those recommendations, okay, and if we can thank Adam, Louise and Bert for getting this into the system, if you like, but look forward to the further development of it along the improvements and progress that are signalled. And I do appreciate all three of them have been quite robust around this process at a time of quite significant system pressures, but we are making traction with it. So thank you for that. What I want to do now is actually just jump to item 11, because I know that Pam needs to leave. She had signalled that prior to the meeting. And in case there's any questions on the Integration Joint Boards paper. So I'm going to take that 11.3 just now, which is at page 212 of the agenda. And this is a report. Pam, I don't know if you wanted to say anything on this before we then ask for any questions.
Very briefly, thank you very much, Chair. Just to note that the board has got the minutes from Aberdeen City 10th of March, Aberdeenshire 30th of March, and Murray 31st and 31st of March and 26th of May. And the issues covered include areas such as cost of living pressures, financial monitoring and medium-term financial framework, work ongoing around recruitment, National Care Service, contracts being let across social care and grant funding, and the strategic planning going on the way, and delivery plans and developments and changes which have included things such as Home First and minor injury services, and also reports around mainstreaming equalities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that outline, Pam. So are there any questions on the papers on the IJBs? Okay, I don't see any, so thank you for that. And when you need to head off, then please do so. Can I take us back up to item 9, and so the last of the agenda items before we go on to the committee reports, etc. So Sarah, this is on the board governance and completing the work that we started at the last meeting. Do you want to just quickly introduce this paper, please?
Yes, thank you, John. So we have agreed terms of reference for a proposed Population Health Committee. Been very helpful and constructive discussions since the last board meeting, so I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in that. We also have proposals from John, the interim chair, for chairs and members of committees. I think all of the non-exec members have been spoken to about that previously. That's in Appendix 2. And I'm also conscious that we agreed to take back to this meeting from the June meeting proposals for an escalation policy for items from committees to the board. We've since had the July board seminar where we had quite a lot of detailed discussion on how we do governance. And I think it became pretty clear from those discussions in those smaller groups that we need a risk appetite statement. And we probably need to take the escalation work through the culture work that's being done in a group led by Tom and Luann. So rather than drafting an escalation policy, which some people wanted and other people were a bit nervous about, I think we'll keep that on the back burner, but we'll discuss it more both in a seminar to be held led by the Audit and Risk Committee. Actually, that was agreed at Audit and Risk on Tuesday on the risk appetite statement, and through work that we'll do on culture at the November board seminar. And take it through that way. So they're the proposals for dealing with this whole business about how issues get moved around our governance system. But I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Open that up for any comments and questions, please. Okay, I'm not seeing any, and as you say, Sarah, a lot of it is pulling together so that we can formally make decisions on discussions that have been taking place. If I take us to the recommendations on page 178 of the pack, 178 and some 179 in fact. So the revised terms of reference for Population Health Committee to be approved, adopted. The chairs and members, as I identified, those appointments to be approved. The terms of reference to be increased, to be added to by increasing the number, and that gives equity across the numbers of committees that we are part of, and strengthens our position in terms of being quorate. Then what you said about the board's risk appetite statement, how that will be dealt with, and the escalating issues. So are we happy to approve those 5 recommendations that we have today?
Agreed.
Yes.
Okay, right. Thank you for bringing all that together, Sarah. That's useful. I think that finishes that piece of work, and then we'll have the escalation part in due course. Okay, so in relation to that governance work, Sarah, these next committee reports are the last time we're going to get these, is that correct? Because committees will be working on behalf of the board in future.
Yes, and this is the final valedictory round of these reports. Yeah.
Okay. Make the most of them, folks. Okay, so we'll go through these as we have done usually. So we've got the Audit Committee report, and I'll invite the chair if they want to say anything in relation to this, or just open it up for any questions. So, Sandy.
Maybe just a signpost, just 2 or 3 things very quickly. Just to note, Scottish Government's audit confirmed that our level of compliance with cybersecurity had increased, and our level of risk exposure had decreased. And there have been very positive comments in relation to the governance, innovation and leadership in cybersecurity and risk management in NHS Grampian. So that was very well received. We're very pleased to see that there's additional capacity planned to help with counter-fraud activity. And I think just to note, Chair, that at long last, and thanks to the perseverance of Gary Kidd, we've received the assurance that we were looking for in relation to the services hosted externally on our behalf when all these services were given an unqualified audit for 2021-22.
Thank you, Sandy. That's really useful to bring that point to conclusion as well. Any questions or comments for Sandy? Okay. The Endowment Committee, Luann isn't here today, but the reports are here, and we're asked to note the points that are highlighted. Is there anything anybody wants to raise on these today? Okay, if we can note those then. And then page 200, we've got engagement and participation. Amy, did you want to say anything on this?
Chair, yes, I would, thank you. I'm aware that there's quite a bit of detail on the volunteer impact on the organisation, but we actually thought that was really important for the board just to be aware of the current work that's going on and initiatives going on within volunteering. And we've just been talking about workforce earlier on, and I think the volunteers add that sort of complementarity to our workforce where it's possible. So I just wanted to thank volunteers for all that they do, and hopefully this can get a kind of strategic lens going forward in our assurance process.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that, and yeah, I certainly want to echo the valuable contribution that they provide. So anything on this report anybody wants to raise? Okay, thank you, Amy. If we can go on to Performance Governance Committee. Again, Rona's not here, but the report is there, page 203. Is there anything on this anybody would like to raise? Okay, if we can note that. And Staff Governance Committee, Joyce.
Yeah, just to say that there's been a significant amount of work undertaken on areas of concern which were raised by the committee. The execs have been very busy in the several weeks since that meeting. We have a meeting next week, and I expect to see progress and improvement and a great deal more positivity, so the areas of concern should be reduced at that point.
Okay, any questions? No. Okay, thank you, and we can note that as well. Thank you very much. If we go on to item 11, we've dealt with 11.3. So 11.1, Area Clinical Forum. Kim, you're giving us a verbal comment today.
Yes, thank you. Apologies for the lack of an actual paper today. Just a couple of comments. I'd mentioned before that we had a workshop around our engagement and how we fit into the system. So we're still working our way through that information and working on ways on how we can improve our connection in with the system as Area Clinical Forum, and we've done some meeting with the portfolios so far around that. And I suppose the other 2 points really are just continued concerns, very strong concerns from our dental profession around their NHS services and the impact on paediatric dental health around the NHS services, but also post-COVID period, and just the continued background noise of workforce recruitment, retention and delays in the system that raise their head all the time. So, but that's everything for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm aware on the dental service issues that clinical governance had considered that at its last meeting, and that could be raised again at the meeting next week if further assurance is required. So anything on the Area Clinical Forum? Okay, thank you, Kim. And Rachel, if I can go to you for the GAPF.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to respond to any questions any members of the board may have in relation to the report, but I'd also like to highlight to board colleagues that consideration of the ability and appetite of staff to adopt and contribute to all the ongoing activity that has been discussed as part of the board meeting today continues to be discussed through the Area Partnership Forum, and acknowledging that staff health and wellbeing continues to be a priority for NHS Grampian, and that the discussions at the Area Partnership will also be reflective of any feedback that's received through the relationship between the Area Partnership Forum and the Staff Governance Assurance Committee as well. Thank you.
Okay, so anything anybody wants to raise on this? Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. I would just like to mention one point around this. In the report that Sarah provided for us, we were looking at the fact that committee chairs will start to meet periodically, and that will become just part of helping to coordinate the work. What I've also done is started to meet with the chairs of Area Clinical Forum, Grampian Area Partnership Forum and Spiritual Care Committee prior to a board meeting, because these reports come at the end of the of our agenda, and sometimes we're moving quite quickly through them. And I just wanted to make sure that they get due attention, if you like, through myself as chair, and able to support bringing things into the system, and being aware what will come into the board, so that we can preserve time for it on the agendas as needed. So that's still a bit of a work in progress, but it's to make sure that we give due attention to those as well as the committees. Okay, thank you. So what we've got left is at item 12, and it's for noting the approved committee forum and IJB minutes, which are all as set out in item 12 there, 12.1 to 12.9. And they're there if anybody does want to ask any question on any of them. I'll just open that up across them all if anybody signals which one, if they have a question. Okay, so if we can note all of those minutes, thank you. I've not had any intimation of any other business, but is there anything else anybody wants to raise? Rachel?
Thank you, Chair, and sorry to take up your time. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for your very kind words at the start of the meeting, but I'd also like to express my thanks to the members of the board, past and present, and to those who have supported and presented at the board during my elected term. The last 4 years has allowed me to gain a greater understanding of what is an extremely complex system, and it's provided me with a significant number of learning opportunities. I've really valued the opportunity to participate and contribute to the work of the board, and I'd like to wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you.
That's very kind of you, Rachel. I'm sure everybody is very pleased to receive that from you, and we wish you. I'm sure we're going to come across you into the future, and we'll look forward to doing that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got the date of our next meeting on the 6th of October, and that concludes our business for today. So thank you very much. It's been 2 long meetings, but some really significant issues that we've had to deal with. So thank you very much, and wish you all the best for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.